It was a regular evening in my flat. The soft hum of the city outside mixed with the comforting quiet inside, where I sat by the window sipping a cup of herbal tea. The city lights twinkled beneath me, reflecting the scattered thoughts racing through my mind. But tonight wasn't about me. Tonight was about them, those moments when someone tries to hide the truth, their intentions disguised under the heavy weight of lies. I had learned the hard way that liars don't confess with their words. No, they expose themselves subtly through their questions. And those questions, if you pay attention, tell you everything. This isn't a tale about betrayal or a bad relationship. It's about understanding the art of spotting deception. And trust me, once you start to listen closely, once you tune into the lies hiding behind these common questions, you'll stop being fooled by masks that speak. I remember the first time I realized how much I had missed. It was a few months ago when I started noticing patterns in conversations I had once considered ordinary. In one such conversation, I was talking to Alan, someone who had always been a good friend, or so I thought. The situation had started with the usual small talk, but it quickly shifted to a strange discomfort when I asked him about something that had been bothering me, something that didn't seem right. "Why don't you trust me?" Alan had asked, his eyes darting away from mine just for a moment as though searching for the right words. I wasn't sure what it was about his tone, but something felt off. The question itself felt heavy. It felt rehearsed. At that moment, I remembered something my grandmother used to say: truth doesn't beg for belief, it proves itself. And there it was, the first sign that something wasn't right. When someone questions your trust, it's usually because they haven't earned it. Think about it. Why should trust have to be begged for? It's a natural result of honest actions, not something that needs to be defended by question after question. Alan had been trying to shift the blame. In that moment, I realized he was trying to make me question my instincts. "Are you accusing me?" he asked next. His voice had dropped, almost a whisper now, trying to deflect the situation. It was as if the room had shifted around us. He was no longer the friend I thought I knew, but a man backed into a corner, playing the victim. Liars, I'd come to learn, play this game well. By asking if I was accusing him, he was trying to escape facing the facts. He wanted to make me feel guilty, to make me feel as though I was in the wrong for asking the questions in the first place. I didn't say anything immediately, just let the silence stretch between us. Alan's unease was palpable. The question hung in the air, but I wasn't ready to fall for it. "Don't you believe me?" he repeated, as if my lack of response required further explanation. This time, his voice cracked slightly. I could tell he was getting desperate, but more importantly, I could feel the shift in the power dynamic. Liars do this often. They repeat their question, trying to convince you rather than confess. The idea isn't to reveal the truth, but to manipulate you into doubting your own perception of the situation. And that's when I realized how deep his lies ran. This wasn't about truth at all. It was about control. "Why would I lie to you?" The next question came almost immediately, as if it was part of the script. His tone had shifted, becoming more defensive, more pointed. He needed me to see him as a victim, innocent and wronged, not the perpetrator of the deception. The irony was not lost on me. A real answer never hides behind a question. This wasn't about proving his innocence. It was about shifting the focus to distract me from pressing him for answers. That's the key here. The more a liar avoids the question, the more they're trying to keep you from uncovering the truth. By now, I was standing near the kitchen counter, my fingers curling around my mug as I tried to calm the storm in my mind. I looked back at him and simply asked, "Who told you that?" The question took him by surprise. Liars fear exposure more than the lie itself. By asking who had told me, I could see the panic in his eyes. The question wasn't about seeking information. It was about redirecting the conversation, steering it away from the real issue. He didn't want to know who had exposed him. He just wanted to shift the focus again, away from his lies and onto a more comfortable ground. "What do you mean by that?" he asked, his voice faltering. This wasn't a genuine question. It was an attempt to buy time, to slow things down so he could think of a way to twist the narrative. When someone pretends confusion in a conversation, it's often a tactic to stall. It's not about seeking clarity, it's about evading the deeper questions that expose the truth. In that moment, I could almost hear the wheels turning in his head as he scrambled to think of his next move. And then, the final blow. He asked, "Can we just move on?" At that moment, I knew everything I needed to know. This wasn't just about the situation at hand. This was a man who wanted closure without accountability, who wanted to sweep everything under the rug. The sooner he could escape the conversation, the less chance he'd have to answer for his lies. But I wasn't ready to let him off the hook. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The moment when the truth, buried under layers of questions, finally surfaced. I told him calmly, "No, we can't just move on." His face paled as he realized that he had lost control of the situation. He was expecting me to let him go, to buy into his narrative, but I wasn't that naive anymore. Not after learning the language of liars. We stood in silence for a long time. I didn't need to raise my voice or get emotional. I had already said what needed to be said. The questions, the tactics, the avoidance, it all spoke louder than words ever could. When he finally left, I didn't feel the anger I expected. Instead, I felt a strange sense of peace. The truth had been revealed, not through a confession, but through his questions, the very things that had once been masked as concern or confusion. As the door clicked shut behind him, I sat down again by the window, the tea still warm in my hands. I smiled softly to myself, feeling lighter than I had in months. I had finally understood the power of listening not just to words, but to the silences, to the subtle manipulations hiding within questions. And in that moment, I knew that justice had been served not because I had confronted him, but because I had seen through the lies. Remember, the truth doesn't shout. It doesn't need to beg for belief. It quietly reveals itself, often in the most unexpected ways. The moment Alan left, I could feel a sense of quiet triumph settle over me. The storm of emotions I had expected to feel didn't come. Instead, there was a deep, calm, knowing that justice had been done. It wasn't the kind of justice that could be measured by an apology or some grand confrontation. No, this was a different kind of justice. It was the justice of clarity, the justice of truth that had been exposed in the simplest, most profound way. I reflected back on everything. The questions, the evasions, the constant shifting. How had I not seen it before? It was all so clear now. The thing about liars is that they often believe they're smarter than the person they're trying to deceive. They believe they can outsmart you with their carefully crafted stories and manipulative questions. But what they fail to realize is that when you begin to listen not just to the words, but to the pauses, the shifts, the subtle manipulations, you can see through the facade they've carefully built. And that's what had happened in my case. Alan wasn't a mastermind, not by any stretch. He was just a man trying to use his words to control the situation, to manipulate me into a position where I would either doubt myself or simply let him off the hook. But I wasn't playing that game anymore, not after everything I had learned. What I realized in the quiet aftermath was how often we, as humans, give others the benefit of the doubt. We want to believe the best in people. We want to trust them, and that's not a weakness. It's one of the best things about user capacity for hope and trust. But there's a balance, and in this case, I had learned that balance through Stoic wisdom. You see, Stoic philosophy teaches us to see things as they truly are, not as we wish them to be. It's about embracing reality, no matter how uncomfortable it might be. It teaches us to hold ourselves accountable, to stay in control of our own emotions, and not let the behavior of others dictate how we feel or react. But it also teaches us that we don't have to accept deceit, especially when it's staring us right in the face. After Alan left, I didn't immediately feel anger or resentment. That would have been easy, the natural reaction perhaps. But the Stoic approach teaches us not to be moved by things outside of our control, especially not by the actions of others. I realized that in this situation, the only thing I had control over was my own response, and my response wasn't anger, but clarity. I reflected on the questions he had asked, each one a subtle attempt to manipulate, to deflect, to avoid accountability. Why don't you trust me? The trust had never been about asking for it. It had always been about actions. Trust, I now knew, was something that had to be earned, not demanded, and Alan had failed to earn it. Are you accusing me? Here, he had tried to make me feel guilty, to shift the blame to me. But the truth had always been clear. I wasn't accusing him, I was simply seeking the truth. Don't you believe me? Again, a manipulation. Not a question of truth, but a question of trust. A question aimed at creating doubt, at making me second guess my own instincts. But I had learned, through the teachings of ancient philosophers like Marcus Aurelius and Seneca, that I must trust my own reasoning above all else. It was not my trust that was at fault, was his actions. Why would I lie to you? This question was a deflection, a way to avoid addressing the core issue. It wasn't about why he would lead, it was about his willingness to lie in the first place. And in this case, I had already seen through it. Who told you that? A classic move of redirection. By asking who had told me, Alan was attempting to protect himself, to shift the focus away from the lies he had told and onto someone or something else. But again, I wasn't buying it. It was a game, and I wasn't playing. What do you mean by that? A stalling tactic, pure and simple. He wanted to buy time to prevent me from asking the questions that would expose him for what he truly was, a liar. But the more he stalled, the more the truth became clear to me. And finally, can we just move on? This, in my opinion, was the most telling. He wasn't asking for closure, he was asking for escape. He wanted to leave the conversation without facing the consequences of his actions. But I wasn't going to let that happen. Not anymore. I felt like I had come out on the other side of something. A little wiser, a little stronger, and a whole lot more aware of the games people play. But I also knew that this was just one battle in the larger war we face every day, with lies and deceit running rampant in the world. The difference, however, was that now I had the tools to recognize it. I had learned the language of liarsan. That was a power I wasn't willing to give up. The Stoics believed that we should always strive for virtue, for truth, and for wisdom. And in this moment, I felt that I had lived up to that. I had faced the situation head on, not with anger or frustration, but with clarity and calm. I had learned to listen not just with my ears, but with my mind and heart, and I had made sure that justice was served, not through a confrontation, but through an unwavering commitment to the truth. In the end, I felt at peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing you've done the right thing. The kind of peace that comes from recognizing the lies for what they are and refusing to let them sway you. The kind of peace that comes from knowing that, no matter what anyone else says or does, the truth will always find a way to reveal itself. If this story resonated with you, if you've learned something today, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Be sure to hit the like button if you found value in this. And if you're not already part of the Modern Stoic, make sure to subscribe for more insights, wisdom, and stories where ancient philosophy meets modern life. Stay strong, stay wise, and keep living the truth.